Hey, Kevin, how are you doing? Nice to see you again. We're here with Kevin Bost. My name's Jeff Schneller. I work at GitKraken as a product director. I work on our sort of cloud services, dev services platform side of things, driving cloud content to the tools and products that we make here at GitKraken. And I'm joined by Kevin Bost. Kevin, why don't you take a few seconds, introduce yourself, and let everybody know who you are?
Yeah, Jeff, thank you. My name is Kevin Bost. I'm a senior software architect with a company out of Spokane, Washington called IntelliTech. I'm a Microsoft MVP and more importantly, a GitKraken ambassador.
Thanks for being here, Kevin. We're going to talk about a few different things: insights, engineering metrics, developer productivity, developer experience. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Just get some real world input and your opinions, ideas, things that you experience in your day to day, and we can share that with the rest of everybody here at GitKon. Um, it's been pretty popular, like the rise of engineering metrics, engineering productivity. You've got things like space, you've got like Dora metrics. There's a whole bunch of different, best practices, things that are out there, common metrics and methods we see across the gamut. And a lot of teams are using these to sort of fine tune and produce, outputs and outcomes that they want to see in their teams. Could you talk a little bit about, what you're familiar with, things that you might see in your day to day, the things that you and your team do, to try to leverage these types of metrics and engineering insights when you're working with your team?
Yeah, certainly. So I work with a variety of different teams, and so it's going to vary a little bit from team to team. But in a lot of them, we end up specifically looking at metrics as part of our daily stand-ups. Most of the time, we're doing some sort of Scrum or Scrum similar process. And at a minimum, checking things like test rates, failures, deployment frequency are kind of key metrics that oftentimes the teams are looking at. Just making sure that things are moving out, especially for some of the bigger projects. It's nice to be able to run your tests on every pull request, but you've always got a set of maybe integration or UI related tests that take a little bit longer to run, probably don't run on every PR, but you're running them on deploys out to your dev or test type environment to make sure your builds are good, and making sure that those insights are surfaced up to the team, let them know, hey, here's how it's going, or yesterday's release, yeah, it tanked, everything's crashing and going down, we need to look at this right away. So those are oftentimes easy ones that we look at as well, and occasionally diving into more code related metrics, cyclomatic complexity at times, but it does depend a lot on the team.
Gotcha. Yeah, a lot of teams we've talked to have, it's kind of three goals in mind, right? They want to increase how fast or how, frequently developers are pushing code, committing code, getting code out there into the production environments. They want to make sure it's good quality. And then they also want to sort of measure and understand like how effective or how satisfied like developers' experiences are being, right?
Yeah.
From what you mentioned, maybe you can speak to a little bit about it. Do you agree with that sort of sentiment? Is there more to it? Do you look for other things involved, or how do you find some of those outcomes or goals that you have in mind when you're looking at these metrics?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, shipping's a feature and every app has to have it. And so anything that can help us move from development all the way out to production. A big one for us that we see when we're looking to try to improve a team's kind of productivity is oftentimes looking at story size. And this one kind of comes out in a lot of those metrics around maybe merge rates or similar. If a story is taking a team an entire sprint to go through and actually get done and things aren't being broken down, you start to see that lag time increase. Deployments to productions take longer, merge rates take longer, PR reviews take longer. The entire step in that development process just kind of increases and moves out. It also can be an indicator of if testing isn't being done appropriately kind of mid-sprint. Rather than testing things rapidly as stuff is coming in, some teams prefer to do a bunch of work and then throw it over the fence at a QA team to say, hey, now go and test all of this kind of the following sprint. And all that ends up doing is kind of producing that lag time and increasing the feedback loop, which oftentimes the idea of trying to shift everything left, we want our feedback in quicker. We want developers to see that right away. So often looking at that merge rate, throughput, and deployment frequency are useful. But oftentimes those are sometimes symptoms of a problem, not necessarily the problem in and of itself. So kind of using those metrics as a guide to know where to look and figure out kind of where the problems lie.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And it actually leads to kind of something I was going to talk about, which is the risks maybe involved in focusing too heavily on metrics. And I know, you mentioned they are definitely indicators, right? They can be guides for the team, for you, for other developers to see, hey, we see that there's something happening. We just don't know where they are. And one of the caveats a lot of people are talking about, as soon as you make this metric the goal, it becomes a bad metric, right? Like as soon as you start to say, oh, well, the merge rate's going down, I know how I can fix the merge rate. I can merge more and just make smaller commits and do that whole thing. Well, that's not really helpful, right? So what are some things that you think are helpful or useful in balancing the observability of like these metrics, but balancing it out with not making the end goal the metric itself? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly on the point. Is the moment you make it a target rather than a goal, it becomes a problem. And so in a lot of cases, when we're working with teams, we try to focus on having the team have buy-in on what these are, understanding why it's better, and trying to help them move towards it. That's part of why we like to look at them as part of the stand-ups, is because if the teams have buy-in on understanding kind of the direction that we want to go of, hey, we are looking to improve our release frequency, right? How quickly are we actually releasing? In the last 6 months, have we done 1 release or 5? Well, if we've gone from 1 to 5, that's great. We're moving in a positive direction. There was one team we were working with that was only releasing about once a quarter, and started looking at different metrics, diving in to figure out where the problems were. And at the end, it came down to going back to that story size. Things were big. Oftentimes, teams weren't merging things, but maybe once a sprint. And so working at bringing that down with the goal of looking at how often we're releasing to production and getting the team in that mindset of, hey, we want to get stuff in quicker, a lot faster, and start to work through those individual problems. At the end of the day, a lot of these metrics are measuring technical things, and a lot of problems are people things. And it's really hard to solve people type process problems with technical solutions. You can only kind of use them as a guide and a measurement. And the other one too is really focusing on the people behind it. Like oftentimes we'll go ahead and look at if maybe there's one particular developer that's not getting a lot of stuff merged through, that's not necessarily a negative on that developer, but it might be an indication that, hey, maybe there's something going on. Maybe we should have a conversation and see, hey, maybe there's something not even work related happening. And so using that as a way to be able to kind of pull that information in and be able to target that information can be really powerful as well.
Yeah, that sounds great, actually. And I mean, that focus on the individual, but like focus on the developer, that's something that sort of has thankfully been coming out of studies that people like Abhi Noda and the DevX movement. They've all been sort of looking at a lot of these notions of the developer experience and what it takes to avoid making the goal the metric itself, right? When we look at the individual dev, for example, I think a lot of what we see out there as far as the 3 pillars of DevX goes, there's the aspect of cognitive load, like helping the developer not find or not be overwhelmed by the amount of information or demand of things that have to juggle. The sort of increased frequency of like feedback loops, like you were saying, like getting information critical to them to increase the pace at which they're, understanding when there's an issue or when, something's being blocked. All of these things are really part of just kind of like that DevX spectrum. And I'm curious from your point of view, right, to help enable some of that stuff and things like flow state, like what are some processes or things you have in place that you and your team maybe do to, invest in that component, right? Invest in the person, invest in the individual dev to help them work faster, better, more efficiently.
Yeah, so a lot of it comes down to one, we try to make sure that we paired all of our devs with a mentor. And this isn't necessarily a technical mentor, though oftentimes it can be in a lot of cases, but somebody who's kind of focused on the individual and making sure that they're feeling productive, they're feeling successful. And if not, being that advocate kind of alongside of them of, okay, what do you need? What would help you out here? kind of at a higher level too, at the management, we also invest a lot in trying to make sure that we have good scrum masters and product owners on the team. I mean, those oftentimes are the unsung heroes where people think that they can get by without them, but oftentimes whoever is filling kind of that product owner role can make or break your team very, very quickly. It doesn't matter how good your developers are. If they build the wrong thing, at the end of the day, it's worthless. So really trying to hone that in. And then on the Scrum Master side, oftentimes looking to make sure people are trained on being that shield. Because too often, especially when we're talking about like developer productivity, meetings and managers are, I think, one of the biggest inhibitors in a lot of cases. Of you almost got to beat them off with a stick of no, let the developers work. They are not productive when you have them locked in a meeting. This is not useful. Now, obviously, meetings are useful. Things need to happen. There's plenty of time for that, but if the developers constantly have that interrupted flow, I mean, there's been plenty of studies about how long it takes the developer to kind of get back into that coding mindset after their flow's been broken. And I know on some of our teams, this is an active problem that we're trying to work to resolve, of constant interruptions, constant meetings, and the devs being jerked around in too many directions, and frankly having a lot of trouble trying to get their traction started to get moving. So
yeah, that's a big challenge, right? Is just the interruption or the distraction, right? You might have some issue you're working on trying to resolve, and then fires come up, right? Or somebody reaches out on Slack and says, "Hey, can you look at this real quick?" Or I have a quick question about our billing system, and then you're triaging something for 2.5 hours in, trying to figure out a bug that you didn't expect to work on. Those are all like really good examples of how these distractions are just naturally coming up. So
yeah,
I think it's a challenge everybody's facing, trying to protect the attention of the developer so that they can focus on the things they need to build. And some of that happens through process, through workflows. Do you have any like tooling or things that the devs kind of extensions or actions, things that help with that cognitive flow state, helping them keep focused?
Yeah. So a lot of times, so our developers are able to kind of flow through various IDEs, tools. A lot of them are heavy GitKraken users, myself included. Obviously, it's definitely a tool of choice that I prefer to go through and do. Having the ability to go through and keep track of what code reviews need to happen, because there is a balancing act with our developers of making sure that in order to keep the merge rate high, that you're actually doing reviews. We typically will set a minimum number of reviewers for PRs just to make sure that we've gotten enough eyes, code sharing, make sure quality bars are being met, that kind of thing. And being able to figure out what's my work that I need to work on. I don't want the developers spending time going, well, what ticket do I pick up next? What PRs are open that might be still pending a review, right? If a PR is sitting there for multiple days, that's a problem. Like somebody should have had time in multiple days to be able to actually go through and get that kind of review in. And again, it kind of comes back to oftentimes we'll be looking at those metrics on the daily stand-up, and especially if we're seeing that our merge rate is plummeted, our Scrum Master hopefully slaps us and goes, "Hey guys, what's going on? Like, why aren't we getting, like, I see PRs are being opened. Why aren't we actually like merging these and closing? Like, is there a bunch of discussion going on? Like, what's the actual team dynamic happening?" And sometimes it's perfectly fine. People are on vacation. Hey, we need somebody. This is blocked by that, whatever. But using those as the guide to know where to go next and where to look next, I think is kind of the most important to stay in that zone.
Yeah, that's one of the important questions that we've been exploring and trying to answer, right? And we have things where we're building today to try to alleviate some of that with our developers, like the focus view, right? Focus view is sort of about, hey, here's everything that I'm trying to juggle right now, and what can we make sense of? What are the things that need my attention, and what are the things that are blocking other people that I work with, right? That kind of thing. And so we're trying to reduce that cognitive load by creating this system in place to help you understand what's most important based on time, based on what you actually want to pay attention to that day. You can pin things, set them to the top, snooze them, move them around, to, defer them to later. Like all of those little sorts of productivity tools are super helpful. So it's good to hear you say some of that. I'm happy to hear like you and your team are actually working towards improving the quality of life of your devs. Is there anything else you'd like to share with regards to that and the developer experience?
I mean, I think the last thing I'll comment on is just kind of looking for opportunities to shift stuff left so that we aren't being interrupted. One of the big ones was security vulnerabilities that was coming in and plaguing our team, because as soon as one comes up, it's obviously this high priority, somewhat disruptive. And things like how GitHub's advanced security kind of helps shift that into our development flow rather than it being something that a vulnerability scanner flags us for later. Just really kind of helps us get zeroed in and focused on it. So at the end of the day, it really is using the metrics to try to guide our decisions and hopefully see the direction where things are going. I will mention one other thing in terms of like testing is we will oftentimes use either number of tests or code coverage, which are those are the easy metrics people latch onto and try to measure to get something useful out of. And it really has to be a direction. I'll often tell people code coverage is a negative metric. You can have 100% coverage, and that doesn't tell me how well your code is tested. It just tells me that you haven't missed any lines. But if you have something that's uncovered, I can guarantee you it's not tested. So having people with kind of that understanding of, hey, we should be moving towards more tests, more coverage, making sure it's the right test, because sometimes just straight up deleting the test that's not adding value is the right answer. And it's okay to see those. It's okay to see metrics go in the quote unquote wrong direction, at least for some period of time, as long as it's understood why. Like that's okay. And I think sometimes people get too focused on, well, we've got to be above a particular threshold. It's like that's the wrong way. That's the wrong way of handling those types of data points.
So, Kevin, you mentioned the idea of shift left, and that's kind of one of the things that we've been strong believers in here, looking at ways we can take the dev collaboration, the things that are happening at the pull request level, and moving them to before the PR, right? It's important to kind of try to get that feedback about code ideas, things you're working on. So often, all of a sudden, the PR shows up, and you have 40, 50 comments of going back and forth and iteration on it, and a lot of this could be happening before you even get to the PR. So, with us, we're looking at, trying to institute this idea of like cloud patches, which is this ability to share code before you make the PR, right? Like you could be working on a branch, you could even see someone's PR and make changes outside of that PR branch and share code, sort of collaborate on the idea before you get to the PR level. I'm curious your thoughts on the pull request as the centralized focus of attention, and do you see most collaboration for you and your team happening there, and is there anything that you and your team do to enhance the experience of not having to make the PR this hub, kind of shift left to your focus and the attention of the developer?
Yeah, I think it varies a lot from team to team, but there's definitely on the better teams, there is definitely this shifting left mentality of being able to do it, because as you said, the PR tends to be that initial point of contact, and at some point that's too late, because by the time the PR is open, a developer's already invested some number of hours in getting to that point, and if they've gone down the wrong path, now there's this, well, shoot, we're throwing away all of this work. Some of my teams, we very much enjoy the idea of pair programming. So we will oftentimes do that just to eliminate that problem of, by the time you get to the PR is a formality, because we've already had multiple sets of eyes looking at it. We've already been collaborating together. It's easy to do. We may not pair on the whole thing. Maybe it's just some critical parts of a feature that we're working on that we'll go through and do as well. So leveraging various tools, maybe inside of like the Microsoft ecosystem with like the live share, to be able to go through and have that kind of collaborative editing. But definitely the idea of the cloud patches kind of excites me as a way of being able to move that information around, because all of the tools that have you both working on the same machine, unless you're both physically sitting at the same machine, there always is kind of this degradation of features that you end up picking up a little bit. And it's always nice when you can be able to collaborate on code and work with your system, your setup, your keybinds, your extensions in the environment you're familiar with, and go from there.
Yeah, I love that idea of making the PR an afterthought. That's super helpful. That'd be great if your PR is just, here's the checks, here's some basic comments, or looking at the files change. But if you've been working with another developer on that, but beforehand, you don't have to invest the time to review that PR that you would ahead of time, because it's lower risk, right? It's lower risk of having things that might break because that collaboration has been happening before. So that's a great example. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you ever have anything more to add, I don't have anything more to add for our talk here today. Yeah, thanks so much for your time, Kevin. Appreciate you talking to us here at GitKon, and I look forward to seeing what you and your team are doing and pushing out there in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity.
Think of GitKraken Dev as your all-access pass to the GitKraken services that we offer. We created a place online for you and your team members to access things like workspaces, focus view, cloud patches, insights. We wanted to enable the accessibility of all of these services, regardless of whatever tool you may or may not be using or extension you might want to install. Even if you're not using GitKraken tools at all, you can still collaborate and work with your team in this space. For developers using GitKraken Dev, we're building a platform that's going to allow you to connect and manage your Git data across all of the GitKraken products. With this comes the ability to access things like the focus view right from the browser, and you can check the status of the most important items without having to install an application or an extension. Being browser-based will allow you and anyone on your team, regardless of how they choose to work with Git, access to these same features and services that improve the developer experience and your Git workflow. GitKraken.dev is in development as we speak. We're excited for you to dive in, explore, and help us shape its future. We really want this to be a tool that helps optimize the dev experience for you and your team, so please head on over for early access to GitKraken.dev, sign up, and join the waitlist. Thanks.